So, what's happening in Kenya? On Wednesday, June 25, 2025, the country was gripped by massive protests. And let me tell you, this wasn't just about a few people being a little upset. This was a full-blown national movement, a chorus of voices rising up from the streets. But why now? Well, it turns out this date is significant. It marks exactly 1 year since the huge youth-led demonstrations of 2024, where people protested against crippling tax hikes. It seems the issues that drove people into the streets back then never really went away. In fact, you could say they've simmered, boiled, and now the pot is overflowing once again, with a new generation of Kenyans saying, "Enough is enough." The anger on the streets is fueled by a potent cocktail of grievances that have been brewing for a long time. First and foremost is the issue of police brutality. People are furious about the heavy-handed tactics used by security forces, a problem that has become tragically familiar. This anger was recently inflamed by the horrific killing of a 31-year-old blogger named Albert Ojwang, who died while in police custody earlier this month. When the people who are supposed to protect you become the source of fear, it creates a deep and dangerous rift in society. This isn't just a policy debate. For many, it's a matter of life and death, and they are demanding accountability. Then there's the ever-present shadow of government corruption. Kenyans are tired of seeing public funds disappear while their own economic struggles get worse. President William Ruto, who came to power in 2022 with promises of economic relief for the hustler nation, is now facing intense criticism. Despite being forced to back down from a controversial finance bill after the 2024 protests, many feel that the government's policies continue to squeeze the average citizen. The protesters' chants of "Ruto must go" are not just political slogans. They are expressions of deep-seated frustration from people who feel their leaders have failed to deliver on their promises and have instead prioritized their own interests. And let's not forget the disappearances. It's one thing to face police in the streets, but it's another thing entirely when government critics start vanishing. Since the 2024 protests, human rights groups have documented over 80 disappearances of activists and critics, with dozens of people still missing. This creates a climate of fear, an attempt to silence dissent not just with batons and tear gas, but with the terrifying uncertainty of a loved one being taken away by plain-clothed officers in unmarked cars. This isn't just a political issue, it's a fundamental attack on human rights and the very idea of a free and open society, pushing people to protest not just for their wallets, but for their very freedom. The protests on Wednesday were not confined to a single city square. They were a nationwide event. From the bustling capital of Nairobi to the coastal city of Mombasa, and in towns like Kitengela, Kisii, Matu, and Nyeri, Kenyans took to the streets to make their voices heard. The scale of the demonstrations showed that the discontent is widespread, cutting across different regions and communities. It was a clear signal to the government that this wasn't an isolated incident or the work of a small group of agitators. This was a coordinated expression of national frustration, a powerful display of unity from a populace that feels ignored and pushed to the brink. Tragically, the day was marked by violence and bloodshed. According to reports from Amnesty International and the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, the clashes resulted in a devastating human toll. At least 16 people were killed, and around 400 others were injured across the country. The majority of these casualties occurred in Nairobi, where people were reportedly hit by live ammunition, rubber bullets, and severe beatings from security forces. These aren't just statistics. They represent families torn apart and lives forever changed. The use of lethal force against demonstrators has poured gasoline on an already raging fire, turning protests about policy into a fight for survival. The response from law enforcement was swift and severe. Police officers were deployed in large numbers, using tear gas and batons to disperse the crowds. In some areas, the confrontations escalated dramatically. Protesters, fueled by anger and grief, fought back. On the outskirts of Nairobi, in a town called Kikuyu, court facilities were set on fire, a symbolic act of defiance against a justice system that many feel has failed them. These scenes of chaos and destruction paint a grim picture of a nation in turmoil, where the trust between the citizens and the state has been completely shattered, leading to a cycle of violence and retaliation. Adding to the tension was a crackdown on the media's ability to cover the events as they unfolded. The government ordered television and radio stations to stop their live broadcasts of the protests, a move widely seen as an attempt to control the narrative and prevent the world from seeing the full extent of the demonstrations and the police response. Furthermore, the internet monitoring service NetBlocks reported restrictions on the social media platform Telegram, and one of the country's major broadcasters, KTN, was even taken off the air. When you start silencing the press, you're not just hiding the truth, you're telling your people that their story doesn't deserve to be told. As his country was rocked by protests, President William Ruto made his position clear. The day before the major demonstrations, on Tuesday, June 24th, he delivered a stern message. He pledged to stand by the police and issued a warning to the protesters, cautioning them against using force or threatening law enforcement. This statement was seen by many not as a call for calm, but as a defense of the security forces' actions and a potential green light for a heavy-handed response. Instead of addressing the root causes of the people's anger, the economic hardship, the corruption, the police brutality, the president's words seemed to focus solely on maintaining order, further deepening the divide between his administration and the citizens on the street. The international community, meanwhile, was watching closely. A group of Western embassies, including those of the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada, issued a joint statement. They urged for the demonstrations to remain peaceful and condemned the use of plainclothed officers in unmarked vehicles to abduct protesters, a practice that has spread fear and outrage. This statement highlighted the global concern over the deteriorating human rights situation in Kenya. It was a diplomatic way of saying, "We see what's happening, and we are not okay with it." The involvement of these powerful nations put additional pressure on the Kenyan government to handle the situation with restraint and respect for democratic principles. Kenya's government, however, did not take kindly to the international critique. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a response that was both defensive and assertive. The ministry stated that any violations by the police would be addressed through Kenya's own government institutions, essentially telling the world to mind its own business. The statement also emphasized that diplomatic partnerships require mutual respect, implying that the embassy's public condemnation was an overstep. This diplomatic back and forth shows the delicate balance Kenya is trying to strike, wanting to maintain its international relationships while also strongly resisting what it perceives as external interference in its domestic affairs. This clash of statements reveals the immense pressure President Ruto's government is under, both from within and from outside. On one hand, he faces a powerful, youth-led movement that is demanding fundamental change and is no longer afraid to challenge his authority directly. On the other hand, he has to manage the expectations and concerns of Kenya's international partners, who are crucial for trade and aid. The president is caught between a rock and a hard place, and his decisions in this critical moment will not only determine the immediate outcome of the protests, but will also shape Kenya's political landscape and its standing on the world stage for years to come. So, why do these protests matter so much? It's because they represent more than just a single day of anger. This is a pivotal moment for Kenya, a potential turning point in its democratic journey. For years, the country has struggled with cycles of political violence, corruption, and a feeling that the system is rigged in favor of the elite. These protests, led overwhelmingly by the youth, are a direct challenge to that status quo. They are not just demanding small policy changes. They are demanding a fundamental shift in how the country is governed. This is about accountability, transparency, and a government that serves the people, not the other way around. What makes these demonstrations particularly significant is the role of Kenya's young people, often referred to as Gen Z. This is a generation that is digitally savvy, globally connected, and less bound by the traditional ethnic and political loyalties that have often divided the country. They have used social media to organize, mobilize, and share information, bypassing traditional media channels and creating a decentralized movement that is difficult for the authorities to control. They are not waiting for established politicians to lead them. They are taking the lead themselves, proving that they are a political force to be reckoned with. Their courage is redefining the nature of activism in Kenya. The outcome of this struggle will have lasting implications for the nation's future. If the government responds with more repression and fails to address the protesters' legitimate grievances, it could lead to further instability and an even deeper erosion of public trust. However, If the government chooses to listen, to engage in genuine dialogue, and to implement meaningful reforms, this moment could be the start of a new, more inclusive chapter for Kenya. It could lead to stronger institutions, greater accountability for police and politicians, and a more equitable economy. The stakes could not be higher, and the path Kenya chooses will be watched by the entire world. Ultimately, these protests are a powerful reminder that the true measure of a nation's strength is not its ability to silence dissent, but its willingness to listen to it. The young people on the streets of Kenya are not just fighting against tax hikes or police brutality, they are fighting for their future. They are fighting for a Kenya where their voices matter, where their rights are respected, and where they have the opportunity to build a better life. They are showing incredible bravery in the face of immense danger, and in doing so, they are not just making noise, they are making history. Their fight is a fight for the very soul of their country.